Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the live stream. I hope you're all very well this evening. Let's see who we have on the stream tonight. We have Audrey, great to see you, Audrey. Jean T, great to see you, Jean T. SD Wheat, great to see you. Cthulhu, great to have you on. 1983 Witch, Raven 1983 Witch, great to see you. Adrian, great to have you on. Chatty Rat, great to see you once again. Killer, thanks for moderating, great to see you. Colin, great to see you too. We also have, let me see, Top Smoke, great to see you. Tiny Demolition Lover, great to have you on. Hope you're well up there in Scotland. We also have Caroline, great to see you. Hugh, great to see you. Hope you're well. We also have CGM, great to see you, CGM. Mike, great to have you on tonight. Watchman of Ulster, great to see you. We have as well Mad Sammy, great to see you. Pero, great to have you on. Buxton, good to see you. Hope you're well tonight. We have, let me see, Norflinger, great to see you. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Richard, great to have you on. Richard, hope you're fine tonight. Greg, great to see you. Audrey, great to see you. Young Ralph, great to have you on. And so many else. Hey, Valerio, thank you so much for that super chat. Not sure why I'm not hearing the notification. Not yet, anyway. Thanks so much, Valerio. Hi, Max. Cheers from Rome tonight. Yay, great to have you back in Rome. Valerio also bounces between Italy and the UK. So I hope you're well. Hope you're having a good time in Rome. Now I hear the notification. Okay. Wasn't sure what was happening there. Of course, we're going to talk about you know what tonight, but I also want to touch on the cost of living crisis as well, but also Brexit, of course, because you all love Brexit. And once again, thanks to Valeria for that super chat. Brexit, as you can see here, it says Brexit on the back burner as Ukraine war hits Boris Johnson's ability to trigger Article 16. This is from the Telegraph. Really? Hits his ability to trigger Article 16. Look, I don't believe Boris Johnson had ever any intention to trigger Article 16, because Boris Johnson only cares about Boris Johnson. Okay, so there's no I don't believe he's going to trigger Article 16. There's no benefit to him triggering Article 16. If there was a benefit to Boris Johnson, then he'd do it, but he understands there is no benefit. And you know, something I think which is interesting is how the Brexiteers or the Unionists in Northern Ireland have relied on Boris Johnson and Lord Frost and Liz Truss. And Liz Truss has been responsible for Brexit for how long now? A couple of months. And as soon as she took over the role, she said, I'm going to hold triggering Article 16 in reserve. And she hasn't done it. Like Lord Frost didn't do it. And Boris Johnson didn't do it. But certain people in Northern Ireland still believe that Boris Johnson is going to trigger Article 16. Anyway, it says here, the war in Ukraine has curbed Boris Johnson's ability to trigger Article 16. Well, it hasn't. Before the Stormont elections in May, government sources have told the Telegraph. The Prime Minister is now unlikely to deploy the safeguard mechanism in the Northern Ireland Protocol, which would suspend disruptive post-Brexit trade rules governing the province this side of the Assembly vote. There's no benefit in triggering Article 16. It just creates a distraction, but not a distraction that would actually serve Boris Johnson any real benefit. And it would be just seen as saber rattling in a sense, creating problems that don't really solve any. You know, the triggering Article 16 doesn't bring down the protocol. It protects the protocol. Now, the idea behind Lord Frost's idea of triggering Article 16 was that, and I believe this was the case, that what he'd do is he'd trigger Article 16 and then use that as a excuse not to implement the rest of the protocol. And that's not really using Article 16 in the way it's designed. So they would trigger it and say, okay, now we can't do anything else because we're waiting for the aspects of the problems related to the triggering of Article 16 to be resolved. But there are no problems that need to be resolved by triggering Article 16 at the moment. And I said before, if the conditions had been met, the tests had been met, then they would have triggered Article 16. They were talking about this almost a year ago. It was, I think, the first time we heard about triggering Article 16 on the UK side was last April. And now we're almost into April 2022, and they haven't triggered Article 16. You know, if somebody kept saying, yeah, I'm going to do something, you know, as my wife says, are you going to do this, you know, something in the house? And I say, yeah, I'm going to do it. And a year has passed. I'm probably not going to do it. Okay. In the same way that triggering Article 16, Boris Johnson's government is probably not going to do it, especially at this moment. It goes on to say the Russian invasion of Ukraine has reduced both the ministerial capacity and the appetite for a political row with the EU, it is understood. You're supposed to be working with the EU at the moment. Momentum for Article 16 to be invoked had been growing in Downing Street amid frustration over trade disruption and minimal progress in long-running negotiations over the post-Brexit trade rules for Northern Ireland. Mr Johnson, facing increasing pressure from senior Tory Brexiteers and unionist parties, told MPs this month, if our friends don't show the requisite common sense, then of course we will trigger Article 16. But once again, triggering Article 16 is not like some big red button. Sorry for the analogy, but it's not like some button that you press and it suspends the protocol. What Article 16 does is it starts. So there's a delay, okay? So if you trigger Article 16, you have to inform the Joint Committee. Then the Joint Committee has to meet. Then they have to decide what they're going to do. They have to investigate the problem. And there are a number of steps that have to take place before you get to them actually meeting. And then they discuss the problem and they try to find a solution. And the idea behind Article 16 is that it's limited in scope and it's limited in time. The idea of it being limited in scope is that it allows the rest of the protocol to be implemented. It's not some sort of massive break. And the Brexiteers are trying to sell it as a massive break, that you press this and the entire protocol comes crashing down. But the reason why the EU are concerned about Boris Johnson talking about triggering Article 16 is that, and I think this is my take on it, that he would trigger Article 16 and then not implement the rest of the protocol. Because it's an insurance policy. It's like a fire extinguisher. It stops a problem, but allows the rest to continue. Maybe fire extinguisher is not the best analogy. If Max doesn't do it for his wife, she needs the guy. I won't even go there. The guy next door is quite handy, but I'm not sure what you're implying there. Let me read some more of your comments. How's World War III going? I'm not sure how to respond to that. Going well or going very badly, depending on your point of view. Akismad, great to see you on the stream. Hope you're well. There's only two things good about Liz Truss. UK have barely enforced sanctions in comparison to the EU. Yes, and I covered that in a video today. Actually, no, it's dropping tomorrow with Dominic Raab. My God, Dominic Raab appeared in, I think, on a number of outlets today, and it was really embarrassing. In one interview, he said, we're not going to release the names of the people who are on this list of sanctions. Okay, we're not going to tell you who they are, because if we tell you who they are, then that will give them time to hide their assets. And then the interviewer said to him, yes, but they've already been hiding their assets. We have the owner, Abramovich, today or this week, talking about trying to sell Chelsea Football Club. So he goes, okay, well, I better sell my ass, get rid of these assets. And Dominic Raab's response to that was, see, it's working. So, first of all, he said, we're not going to release the names because they will sell their assets. And then when he was told, yes, but they're selling their assets, he said, yeah, because it's working. Absolutely insane. One minister, a shortage of certain goods in Northern Ireland are creating resentment about the protocol in the province and heaping pressure on unionist parties to express hardline opposition to it. Now remember, this is the Telegraph that's talking, pro-Tory, pro-Brexit Telegraph. One minister warned resolving the protocol becomes more difficult after May's elections because Jeffrey Donaldson, the leader of the DUP, may refuse to go back into Stormont if it isn't ripped up entirely. The point has been made to the EU. So what Jeffrey Donaldson is doing is he's trying to play two games. He has been trying to bring down the protocol, and that hasn't succeeded. And his next step is, okay, well, he realizes that him banging on about the protocol is not going to win him votes. The votes are likely to split two ways. They're likely to go, the more moderates are going to go probably to the UUP, the Ulster Unionist Party, and the more extreme are going to go to the traditional Unionist voice. So it's likely, it's not a guarantee, but it's likely that the DUP their vote will be split, and they'll lose a lot of seats in the Northern Ireland Assembly. And who is going to benefit from that is Sinn Féin. Sinn Féin are likely to be the biggest party. And the DUP and the TUV have said that they're not going to go into government if Sinn Féin are the biggest party. The D part of the Democratic Unionist Party is completely obsolete, I think, or nonsensical, because you're supposed to go in, you're supposed to represent your voters, your constituents. You're elected to do that. You're not elected to stay at home. And that seems to be what the DUP are planning to do. If Sinn Féin win the most seats, they're not going to go into power with them, and this will be their other way of trying to get rid of the protocol, by not having an assembly. Because in 2024, it's when the assembly will decide, in a sense, the future of the protocol. So if there's no assembly, then I don't know what's going to happen. Maybe it would resort to the UK government, and they're going to maintain the protocol because they haven't gotten rid of it yet. And it's also possible that by 2024 there could be a different Prime Minister. The Labour Party could be in power, and then that would be a guarantee that the protocol will remain. But I think the Tories, even if they remain in power, will maintain the protocol because there's no appetite to get rid of it. If you listen to Jacob Rees-Mogg, who said that the protocol needs to be implemented, then I don't know what the unionists are hoping to. What are they holding out for? There's no real benefit for them. Let me read some more of your comments. I feel like at this point in the world does not even care about the UK politics, even when they try to show their way to stay relevant, and they seem desperate. The unionist parties in Northern Ireland, or the Brexiteer parties in Northern Ireland, are really desperate at this moment. They had the ear somewhat of the Tories. That went away. Then they made a bit of a racket in order to get Boris Johnson to support them, to consider triggering Article 16. And now that's off the table because there are much bigger fish to fry. There's no benefit for Johnson here. He's supposed to present a unified front against Russia. And Northern Ireland, as I've said before, Northern Ireland is not on Boris Johnson's task list. It never really was. But if it did exist, it's just completely falling off it now. Not idiots, just evil and greedy. Why don't Brexiteers demolish and flood the channel if they voted for it's what they voted for. Surely they surely to become Sir Dominic Raab, or maybe not. Sorry, I'm reading it very difficult. I have a difficult angle I'm trying to read it from. Only 90 likes on the stream, guys. Smash that like button. Good evening from the United States. Great to see you, Aubrey. Great to have you on. Hope you're well tonight. Did you notice Boris picked up a hairbrush this week? Not only did it fail, it was seen to fail. Yes, Top Smug. He delivers very important information to the public, and he still looks like he slept, you know, he's like an unmade bed. Anyway, let's move on. And just sticking with the EU and Brexit to a certain extent, the time is now. Moldova officially signs the application for membership to join the European Union. Citizens are prepared to work hard towards a stable and prosperous future in the EU and the family of European states. So this was posted on Twitter by Mariu Sandu, who's the president of Moldova, which is very interesting as well, because she's the president, but she's very young, or she appears to be very young. And I say that because here in Italy, the president has to be over 50 or something like that. There's a minimum age here in Italy for the president, and I think it's something like 40, at least 45, but it could be 50 years old. Which is a bit sad because, you know, if we look at the president of Ukraine, imagine if there was an age requirement, he probably wouldn't have been able to do it. And Ukraine would be much worse off if that was the case. So I'm not a big fan of minimum ages, maybe a maximum age. Keep Berlusconi out because he's like almost 90, I think. So it would be good to have more, you know, fresh faces. Of course, it's always, you know, what these people represent, not so much their age, but generally younger people are a bit more open. There are, of course, exceptions to that. And you probably saw this, and this is the last story for Brexit for tonight, but red tape outrage as EU forces British businesses into monstrous Brexit forms. This is from, I don't know if you can see on your screen, from The Express. So it says here, speaking in the House of Commons yesterday on Thursday, Sir Desmond Swayne, so I uploaded a video about him earlier, Tory MP for New Forest West, scolded the EU for continuing to impose strict checks on traded goods. You know, wouldn't it be wonderful to take this article, go back in time and show it to Desmond Swayne before the election, before the referendum, and say, do you think Brexit is still a good idea? He said it was monstrous. It goes on to say, coming up to 6 years after Britain's vote to pull the UK out of the bloc, the Brexiteer highlighted the removal of trade barriers around the world has helped boost economies. He said it was monstrous. The same was not happening to Britain, which is supposed to be unshackled from the EU. This guy is completely clueless. So you voted to impose restrictions on yourself. You voted for bureaucracy. There was no bureaucracy before, or very little, almost nothing, but there wasn't the same requirements as before. Now because the UK is a third country that Desmond Swayne is happy about, it seems. Maybe he's finally regretting Brexit, although I haven't heard him say this Brexit was a mistake, because if he did, I'd welcome him on board, and you know I'd love to have an interview with Sir Desmond Swayne, the Ramoner, because you know I think it'd be good to hear why what changed his mind. Was it this bureaucracy? But he's complaining about bureaucracy, but not about Brexit, it seems. So Desmond told the House UK aid promoted trade in Africa by making borders seamless through digitizing all administrative processes. Yes, but these are individual countries trading with each other, and they're probably trading in the same products. They may have the same sort of standards, but you want to diverge on standards. So if you want to diverge on standards, then there's more paperwork required. We could reduce the paperwork, Desmond. We could eliminate the paperwork by joining the single market and the customs union. Captain Levance, thank you so much. Whoa, great to see you once again. I haven't seen you in a long time. Hope you're very well. Hello, Max. Haven't donated in a while, even though I listen daily. Thanks for the interesting content. Loving when you get guests on and talk, and think you should have an even bigger platform. Thank you so much, Captain. Thanks so much for that kind comment and the kind donation. I'm hoping I had somebody planned, but I think now is probably not the best time to speak to them. But I will. I hope you get a chance to check out the Sunday brunch. So we had it last week, and we're going to have it again this Sunday at 10 to 11. I just need to double check, but I'll post something on the channel maybe tomorrow about it. But do check out the Sunday brunch with some guests, some new guests also this week, and we just talk about what's happening at the moment, and hopefully some of you can pop on to see that. We got a good following last week, and very first time I think it was very good. And we talked about Ukraine. We only talked about Ukraine, but it was a very interesting discussion with Bowler Hat Man, Big Maj, and Political X. So hopefully we can. Hopefully you enjoy the guests. I'm not going to say who they are. Keep it as a surprise. But hopefully you enjoy the guests this Sunday as well. Thanks so much for that super chat, and great to see you again. It's monstrous that we're filling in forms, he says. Michael Freer, a junior international trade minister, responded at the government's hopes that the best border will be in place by 2025. This would be just shy of a decade after the historic Brexit vote. Some have criticised Sir Desmond for his comments, suggesting he is wrong to complain, given that's what he voted for. Writer Edwin Hayward said in a Twitter post, or a post on Twitter, it's like somebody fighting to enter a marathon, then being shocked that there's running involved. All the clues were there. We helped draft these forms after all. Yes, it was the UK that was the greatest advocate for the single market. It was the UK that wanted to protect businesses and industry in the single market. And the idea that the UK would leave the single market, I think many people, especially those people on the Brexit side, Political X already spoiled tomorrow's surprise. Not tomorrow, it's actually on Sunday. There was a bit of and we're waiting for the correction. So it'll be on Sunday, not on Saturday. But many Brexiteers thought, well, if we leave, we can leave the single market and still have the benefits of the single market because we're cool. We're special. Best border, that sounds like something Trump would say. Yes. It does indeed. Our borders are the best. We're the best. We're the best. We have the best borders. No one has borders like us. They say, I love the way the Trumps used to say, they say, or people say, whoever these people are or whoever they are, we never discover. Of course, these are non-existent people. But for businessman and former MEP Ben Habib, my good friend Ben Habib, Brexit itself was not the cause. Oh no, it's not because of Brexit. Instead, he said the government should hold some responsibility. He told Express.co.uk ministers lacked a post-Brexit vision and so have failed to stand up to the EU on key matters of trade. So the UK became a third country. The reality of a third country doesn't have to apply. Reality doesn't have to apply if you just stand up to the EU. These people are completely delusional. Either they're delusional or they're lying. And maybe it's a bit of both. Starmer's Barber, great to see you once again. Hope you're well. Thanks so much for that super chat. Haven't said hi in a while, Max. Your channel has become a comfort blanket for me. Keep the great work. Thank you so much, Starmer's Barber. And you're always doing a wonderful job. He has a wonderful hairstyle. Great work. Thanks so much for that. Trump's border wall fell over yesterday for real. And, joking aside, the border, Trump's border was deeply damaging to the environment. It stopped animals migrating. It was, parts of it are rusting and falling apart, and it's creating debris around, and it was an eyesore as well. I always thought, if Trump wanted a border, why didn't he pay for it himself? Why should the state, the government, the federal government, have to pay for his bloody wall? If it was such a great thing, why didn't he pay for it himself? Why didn't he have a whip round? Ask his supporters to donate their life savings to put up this bloody wall. And then, of course, they would donate their life savings, and he'd put it in his pocket. And then they would still vote for him the next time. This is something I really don't understand about these people. They've been conned by Trump. Steve Bannon was he indicted, or he was arrested? Or I don't remember what happened with Steve Bannon, but he was, or maybe he was convicted of lying to or conning these people out of money to help pay for Trump's legal costs, and then I don't remember, but it was all a big scam anyway. And there's a possibility he might be back. Okay, guys, so that's enough of Brexit. Let's move on to what's happening in Ukraine. So I just want to show you the latest information, but there's one here I think that's quite important. Not fundamentally important, but it says here, you should see on the screen, Russia bans Twitter. This just in, Russia has banned Twitter throughout the country, according to Interfax news agency. Now, this is interesting because a lot of Russian trolls, are on Twitter. So what's going to happen to them? But the idea that Putin is closing everything down, suspending Facebook, access to Facebook, suspending access to Twitter. A number of Western companies have pulled out, apart from Coca-Cola, it seems, so far, unless something has changed in the last hour. But a number of companies have pulled out. This is going to be extremely damaging to the Russian economy. Cahill, thanks so much for that super chat. A knighthood for Gavin Williamson. It's difficult to take anyone in the UK cabinet seriously. Thanks so much for that. Yes, and I'm going to get to that in a moment, later on in the stream. Gavin Williamson, like the most incompetent minister since Matt Hancock or Dominic Raab, I don't know, but really, it really does set a standard, doesn't it? I wrote on Twitter yesterday or the day before, I said, look, don't worry, don't be upset that Gavin Williamson received a knighthood. Jimmy Savile received one. Edward Lee received one. So, it doesn't say a lot about people who have received knighthoods. No, I'm joking. There are a lot of good people who have received them. But I think they should not be given to politicians. A politician's job is to represent their constituents, to run the country. They don't deserve a knighthood. Okay, Keir Starmer got one because of his work as a lawyer, in the CPP, but not as a politician. I don't agree with giving politicians knighthoods. Now, I don't know about others, like Edward Lee. He's been a politician probably all his life. He probably got while he was a politician. But Gavin Williamson, what has he done? Is he there? It's like we need. I don't know whether, like, he's knighted. Will he get a lordship as well? Will he be put in the House of Lords? Throw another one in there to prop up the Tories somewhat. I don't know. So it's interesting that Russia has banned Twitter. And actually, another question I have about this is, when this is all over, or how it ends, nobody knows. Are we going to go back to some sort of normality? Is there going to be a new leader in Russia, and Russia will unban Twitter? Will there be a reopening? That's, because it's difficult to see that at the moment. We're just at the beginning. The latest here is British Prime Minister Boris Johnson said in an interview today that he saw a close analogy between Russian President Vladimir Putin and the late Serbian strongman Slobodan Milosevic, who was charged with war crimes. Well, he's right. Yes, it's very similar. Poland has arrested a Spanish journalist on suspicion of being a Russian spy who was planning to go to Ukraine in order to continue his activities. That's concerning. More on Russia's online censorship. Following a ban on Twitter in Russia, YouTube also appears to be blocked throughout the country. Wow. Like, how are people supposed to get... So they're basically closing down the internet. Like, Facebook is gone. A lot of people get their quote-unquote news from Facebook. Twitter is gone. YouTube is gone. This is extremely concerning because so Russians are only going to get their information from where? From TV or newspapers. So, and those TV channels are completely controlled by the state. So this is really North Korea. Russia is moving towards something like North Korea. Close the borders like North Korea as well. And we've seen stories about how people are not allowed to leave Moscow. This is very concerning. It says here also, Russia state media regulator Roskomnadzor has restricted access to Twitter, confirmed TASS news agency today. And there goes Twitter. In Russia, the country has been disconnected from the world. In 1 week, a nation of 145 million hermetically sealed with barely any objection from Putin's Duma. That's the parliament. They approved his special operation in Ukraine and his massive repression and censorship at home. This is the sort of, and look at what, look at his role around the world. Look at his role when it came to Brexit. Supportive of Brexit. This was his attempt to drive a wedge between member states, hoping that this would create a domino effect. It would, the UK would go down first, then maybe Italy or Spain. Eventually France and Germany would leave the European Union, crush the European Union in this sense. It's not about his driving goal was to do this, but he saw that there were cracks, and he helped widen those cracks a little bit. Throw a bit of money here, a bit of money there. Cambridge Analytica, for example, a few donate to dodgy politicians. Some of his cronies have money in media outlets, for example, who keep pushing not so much pro Russia propaganda, but anti-harmony propaganda, in a sense. The idea that trying to create division within the country. And I think this is, maybe I'm going off the deep end here, but I feel that a lot of this sort of rubbish we're hearing generally about wokeness, or about PC culture, or about how the society has become decadent and we're moving away from traditional values and stuff like this. I think a lot of this is down to people trying to sow discontent, the anger with refugees, people who have no power. You notice that these media outlets are always finding enemies, and the enemies of course are people who have no power, never pointing to enemies that have power. Number 3, thanks so much for that super chat. Putin has been preparing a war for 10 years. Yes, I agree. Thanks so much for that super chat. Yes, people seem to think that this is something that's just happened this year or last year. No. This has been something, and there's been something going on for at least 10 years, maybe even more than that. When he saw the fall of the Soviet Union, he got into politics. I think he was mayor of Moscow, or he's mayor of a city in Russia. Then he became eventually prime minister and president, and then prime minister again, and then president again, or maybe it even more than that. But between him and Medvedev, there were, one was president one day and then prime minister the next. And that went on for a while. And I think his goal was eventually, well, the Soviet Union has collapsed. It was undermined probably by the West. So my enemy is the West, and I need to reconstruct it. And maybe we're starting to see that. And I think the fall of Ukraine was part of his plan. Fearless Wolf, thanks so much for that super chat. You are a fearless wolf. Why does Rishi Sunak look like a cartoon rat character? I'm not sure about that. Since the wall fell, Putin has been on a mission. Yes. Just don't send Mistrals back in. She almost pushed DEFCON 1. And I think that's a bit of an exaggeration, but yes, she's not the right person to be dealing with these types of problems. If you look at it, the Prime Minister, if you're imagining a movie, you would imagine Britain during a moment of crisis. You would imagine, I don't know, Hugh Grant or someone like that as Prime Minister. You wouldn't think of Benny Hill, unless it's a comedy. Mr. Bean, Mr. Bean would do a better job than Boris Johnson. At least he wouldn't be overly confident. It says here, I'm still able to access Facebook and Twitter in Russia. It may take time for code to trickle through. I don't know, but I have full access now. Announcing a ban on something is one thing. Making sure it happens is another. There are, of course, there will be people who will be able to find ways perhaps around it, hackers maybe or whatever. But I think Putin has been working over the last number of years of, finding ways to pull the plug. And the fact that the state can do this is extremely concerning. And, I think this is something that plays into this as well, where you have people online or you have people in certain media outlets telling you always to be afraid of, trans people, be afraid of the woke, be afraid of vegetarians, be afraid of these. And in reality, the real fear you should have is of the state, because here is a perfect demonstration of the state, Putin's state, pulling the plug on. People can't access Facebook or Twitter or YouTube. YouTube, I find, is one of the greatest equalizers. Now, it has its problems, but it's a wonderful way for ordinary people to get their opinion across. In the past, what would you do? You'd have to go to the town square, or you'd have to, set up your own TV channel or radio station, and most people don't have the resources to do that. And YouTube was a great democratizer, a great way of leveling, allowing everyone to access the internet and be able to broadcast their ideas and their opinions. And if they're good opinions, people will follow it. If they're bad opinions, people will not. Of course, it has its problems. We see now how the larger corporations are taking over, but it still allows ordinary people a voice. And we can see how, petty things like the things that are certain individuals or media outlets are trying to separate us on are petty compared to the real concerns. And I'm not saying that the issues that I raise are petty. I'm saying that the people are trying to divide us in a way that is petty. There are real issues that need to be dealt with, but the way that they're presented is petty. I don't know if I'm making myself clear there. Just see if there's another update. No. But the idea that we have Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube taken down is extremely concerning. And how do we get away from this? How do we get back? So staying with Ukraine, I want to show you this. I'll show you this clip. Richard Turner, thanks so much for that super chat. My birthday tomorrow. Don't want to preempt it, but happy birthday, Richard. All I want to do is wake up to hear Putin is gone. Anyway is fine and end his insanity. The knock is huge across the world. Yes. I think his reign will not last long, because he can't. Russia is not like North Korea. There isn't a dynasty that has existed for decades. I don't think the Russian people will tolerate this, and I think he's making a huge mistake trying to close. As the person said on Twitter earlier, it's a country of 145 million people. You're not going to be able to turn it into a hermit nation. These are people who have grown up in an open society, or relatively open society, access to consumer goods, access to travel abroad. This is not the Soviet Union. And I don't think he's going. And even the Soviet Union, towards the end, was not like this. Not what Putin wants it to be. So I want to show you this clip from the House of Commons the other day.
Will the Prime Minister instruct the Conservative Party to give to Ukrainian humanitarian causes the £2 million they've accepted from Lyubov Chernyukin? This includes £80,000 referred to in data released today by the Electoral Commission. Now, I know he doesn't want to tar everyone with Russian links with the same brush, and neither do I. But leaked documents... They might want to listen to the question, Mr. Speaker. Leaked documents show that Vladimir Chernyukin received $8 million from a Russian member of parliament, an ally of Putin, who was later sanctioned by the United States. Mr. Speaker, this is an opportunity for the Conservative Party and for the Prime Minister to end the suspicion of conflicts of interest with Putin, whilst showing solidarity with the Ukrainian people.
Well, wonderful speech. So, give back the money. You've taken all this money, why not give it back? That would be a perfect example to give. But obviously, well, what did Boris Johnson say?
It is absolutely vital, Mr. Speaker, if we are to have a successful outcome in what we are trying to do collectively, united with Ukraine, that we demonstrate that this is not about the Russian people, Mr. Speaker. This is about the Putin regime.
But you got money from the Putin regime. So he's trying to say, yeah, but it's not all of them. We got money from Russians, but they were good ones, not the Putin ones. Yes, but they're the Putin ones there as well. It's quite pathetic how the Tories are trying to say, but these are not. We got money from good ones, but you shouldn't be getting money from anyone. Obviously, because you're getting money from somebody, you're giving them something in return. What are you giving them in return? Hotaro, the cat, thank you so much for that super chat. Greetings from Germany. Great to have you on the stream. Hope you're well tonight. Hope you're well over there in Germany. What's interesting with Germany following the invasion of Ukraine was how Germany has changed a lot in just a few days. Germany very much anti-war. I'm not saying that they're pro-war, but they have really opened up to the idea of providing weapons. This was completely against their ethos. Not sure about the constitution, but against their ethos to supply weapons to countries at war. And even the Green Party has shifted on this. And we've seen how Germany is going to spend 100 billion euros on re-equipping their military. Because we're looking at what's growing across beyond the border of Eastern Europe, and we have to be concerned. $1 equals 121,000 rubles. My goodness. The EU has changed, yes. let me see. There's another. Yes, this story here I want to share with you.
This is
so. Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, issued a statement today about the situation in Ukraine. Just wanted to share it with you. Before we see that, I just want to read some more of your comments. Norway has supplied weapon systems to Ukraine. Yes, I think even Ireland had a few, I think there were javelins that they sent over, or some type of anti-tank weapon. I think they've either sent them or they're planning to send them. So I think there's every country in Europe has sent some type of weapon over to Ukraine, which is good. First time I visited Germany was directly after reunification. What an experience. I don't think Putin is a communist. He holds the people to communist values, but he decides to have the wealth. Dare I say, even worse than capitalism. Yes. We don't even know how much wealth he has. And if you look at, I think there's a wonderful contrast between Putin and Zelensky, the prime minister, the president of Ukraine, where Zelensky was sitting at a regular table. They signed that agreement with the other members of his party to make a request to join the European Union. A regular table, not some 300-meter long marble table, banquet table, or whatever it is that Putin has. And Putin is always seen sitting in a golden throne. I think once again, either head of the USSR or Tsar. I don't know which he's trying to emulate. I think he's trying to emulate more the last Tsar or the next Tsar. I don't know. Than an actual president or world leader. Putin the Tsar, in all but name, yes.
Testimony to the determination of the global community to reject this invasion. One only needs to see the result of this week's United Nations General Assembly. 141 countries, an overwhelming majority, supported the resolution condemning Russia for its brutal invasion. Only 4 countries out of 193 stood by Russia. It was Belarus, North Korea, Syria, and Eritrea. President Putin is increasingly isolated in the world community, but in the face of the world's protests, Putin's army carries on. Bombings and missile attacks on civilian targets are intensifying. Rest assured, the European Union and the United States will continue to stand by Ukraine and its courageous people and its steadfast leadership. The scale of the humanitarian...
Notice she didn't say the United Kingdom. She said the EU and the United States. I think there's a bit of a rift appearing. And there was another clip of the Secretary of State for the US Secretary of State, who was saying how he was commending the European Union for all that they've been doing when it came to the situation in Ukraine. So you have the EU commending the US, you have the US commending the EU, and Liz Truss, where is she?
Catastrophe there in Ukraine that is unfolding really worries us. Europe is seeing destruction and displacement on a scale not seen since the darkest days of the last century. The European Union, as Ukraine's neighbor, is sparing no effort. We're providing 500 million euros of humanitarian aid immediately, and more will come. We're working fast to establish civil protection hubs in Poland, in Slovakia, and in Romania. And we are also doing everything we can with international organizations and NGOs to set up humanitarian corridors that stretch inside Ukraine. Desperately needed humanitarian aid must be able to reach all parts of Ukraine, and civilians must be allowed to escape cities under siege.
Some of you are saying no mention of the UK and because of Brexit. Can you imagine a situation if Brexit had not happened and the opposite had happened with Brexit, that the UK became more European, more enthusiastically European after Brexit, that people said, well, our home is really in Europe. And Boris Johnson, of course, was not the Prime Minister. It would be somebody else, maybe not even a Tory, but you would have somebody who would be pro-European probably as the Prime Minister. And I think they would be leading the way, and they would be... There's an alternative universe, okay, where the vote went the other way, and I think support for Europe would have gone up. That's what I think would have happened. But that's, wasn't to be.
Finally, the European Union has triggered, for the first time ever, the so-called Temporary Protection Directive. What is it? It effectively opens up residency rights for most refugees to live and work in the European Union, to have access to health services or, for example, schools, for at least a year. We know that this conflict is far from over. And to be very clear, we are ready to take further severe measures if Putin does not stop and reverse the war he has unleashed.
So it's good that there's a year, but I think it maybe is necessary more than that. We'll see how that changes. And I hope that the people, when we stop talking about Ukraine, that there's still support for Ukraine. But I think many people don't know that there has been a lot of work being going on between the European Union and Ukraine long before this war began over the last number of years. And if you look at what happened in Chernobyl, there's recently there was I think in 2014 or 2015 they put on this new cover. I think it was the new not a sarcophagus. It was I don't remember the name of it, but it's a metal cover over the top of the reactor, and that was something co-funded by the European Union. So the European Union already has a bit of a foothold in Ukraine, and there's been a number of agreements between the two sides over the last number of years. Let's move on. I want to show you this, share this story with you, which was interesting. If it's loading, let me read your comments while it's loading. Russia's economy is smaller than that of the economy of Italy. Yes, the economy of Russia is I think it's between something like Italy and Spain, and that's why they're not going to be able to maintain a drawn-out conflict. We've seen tanks, hundreds of tanks abandoned, and these are pretty new tanks, very expensive equipment. I saw a video online of 3 tanks that cost about $16 million each. $16 million for each of these tanks, abandoned, and somebody was setting fire to them. Not a very good thing to do, I think, but to sabotage them so that the Russian army don't come back later and pick them up and take them away. But that's a huge loss. I think the Russian economy is going to... I think we're facing a failed state here. I think we're going the way of Zimbabwe. Not even North Korea, but Zimbabwe or something like that, where you're going to see massive inflation, hyperinflation. The value of the currency is almost completely worthless. And we're also seeing how industry, Western businesses are pulling all of their resources out. These companies hire tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of workers. These workers are going to be on the dole next. You don't want a massive amount of unemployment. Look, at the moment, the focus is on the war. But if the Russian economy collapses, I don't think Putin is going to be safe, no matter what he tries to do. Once again, North Korea has had time to build up an infrastructure of maintaining a facade. Putin won't be able to do that. Things are happening too quickly. Pedro, thanks so much for that super chat. Thank you, Max, for your always interesting content. Thank you so much for that. try to keep it interesting. Try to keep it funny as well from time to time. It's difficult in these very dark times, but I try to do a few funny videos as well. And Saron has been, I don't know where the hell Saron has, maybe he's in London at the moment, trying to get some assets out. I'm not sure. He's a dodgy one. This is from Lindsey Graham. I just wanted to double check the name. Is there a Brutus in Russia? This is from Sky News. A US senator calls on Russians to assassinate Putin. A US senator has sparked outrage after he called on Russian people to assassinate President Vladimir. This is a Republican senator. This is a representative. I don't think he should be doing this. Because of who he is, okay? Because he's somebody who represents the US, represented in the US Senate. I don't think this is a good idea. I think he should call for sanctions, call for punishment, call for him to face a tribunal, to be dragged, before the Hague. But I think this is a bad idea. But it says anyway, Lindsey Graham, a Republican senator from South Carolina, said the only way Russia's invasion of Ukraine ends is for somebody in Russia to take this guy out. Obviously, by saying things like that, you don't know how things operate in Russia. Putin is not just some guy at the top and everyone down below him is fighting amongst themselves. He has had a long time to reinforce his position. It would be very difficult to get to him. There are a number of layers you'd have to get to, a number of people you'd have to bribe in order to get past them. Is there a Brutus in Russia? Is there a more successful Colonel Stauffenberg in the Russian military? He said on Twitter, referencing Marcus Junius Brutus, who took a leading role in the assassination of Julius Caesar in 44 BC, and Stauffenberg, the German army officer who unsuccessfully attempted to kill Adolf Hitler. The only way this ends is for somebody. Okay. The comments prompted a furious response from the Russian ambassador to the United States, Antonov, who said the remarks were unacceptable and outrageous, demanding an explanation. Mr. Antonov said in a statement posted on Facebook. He posted on Facebook. That wasn't a very good idea, was it? Nobody'd actually see it in Russia. I found the statement of the American politician unacceptable and outrageous. The degree of Russophobia and hatred in the US towards Russia is off the charts. It's unbelievable that a senator in a country that promotes its moral values as a guiding star for all mankind could afford to call for terrorism as a way to achieve Washington's goals in the international arena. You're not doing... Look, I'm no fan of Putin, okay? I don't think anyone here is, but that's not what you sort of say, okay? Because you're sort of undermining... You're reinforcing an idea that Putin has been trying to sell to his public. The Americans want to get rid of me. The Americans want to kill me. And there we have an American saying it. You're not doing you're not doing people who are trying to resist Putin any favors. But then these are Republicans. They can't see further than their nose. Earlier this week, Sean Hannity, a Fox News host, also called for the assassination of Vladimir Putin. If you cut off the head of the snake, you will kill the snake. Right now, the snake is... Once again, people who have no understanding of how things work in Russia. I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I understand that Putin is somebody who has been there for a long time. You don't just cut off the head of the snake and then the whole thing collapses. And what would happen? What do you think would happen? Putin has created a huge power base. If he was gone, there would be a vacuum, a massive vacuum. And then what would happen? There would be civil war. Because there are people who would say, there's the possibility to have a huge amount of power. the Americans seem to, these Americans seem to think that, yeah, what will happen is then they'll have democracy. No, that's not how it works. And you should know that when you went into Iraq, okay? I don't want to drag Iraq into this, but, these are the people who were, these were the cheerleaders of the Iraq war. And people were saying getting rid of Saddam Hussein would create problems. And they said, shut up, you scaremongers. And now they're advocating for the same thing again. Slightly different, but you know what I'm getting at. I work for a French guy who's a new age spiritualist, but also anti-vaxxer, and a big fan of Putin for spiritual reasons. Spiritual reasons. Why is there support for Putin, support for Trump, support for Brexit, and anti-vaxxers? They all fit neatly on a Venn diagram. So Putin, the giggling sun baby, the start of the Teletubbies show is all grown up. Nothing good ever comes from being a child. Oh my god. We have to laugh at these things because otherwise we cry. America. Calling for the head of the West actually helps him. In the West actually helps him. Staying silent about Putin's removal and leave that to the Russians might make it more likely. We shouldn't talk about that and hope. Yes. You have to understand that this is somebody who's paranoid. This is somebody who creates paranoia in his society. Like one of the problems, and we've seen it. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but a lot of people have. I'm now starting to sound like Trump. A lot of people. You can find this online. How a lot of the young soldiers, the Russian soldiers who went into Ukraine, were completely taken aback when they arrived, and there were people shooting at them because they were conditioned. They were brainwashed into thinking that the Ukrainian people wanted to overthrow their government. The Ukrainian people were waiting for the Russians to arrive to save them. The problem was that they were conditioned through this. And this is something that really concerns me as well, is how you see something similar with the likes of GB News and Talk Radio and the Daily Mail and the Sun, where they condition people to think a particular way. The left is an enemy, the enemies of the people, the Ramoners, trying to stop Brexit, traitors, things like this type of language. And if you have enough of that and you can control it and focus it like a laser beam, you can create soldiers who will go into a country thinking they're fighting an enemy that doesn't exist. They were told that they're going to fight neo-Nazis. The neo-Nazis are controlling the government, and the Ukrainian people are waiting for the Russians to come and liberate them. That's what they were. And the young soldiers, 17, 18, 19 years old, going into Ukraine, realizing, wait a minute, this isn't the case. The people in Ukraine don't want us here. They're waving their flags. They actually support their president. The vast majority of people in Ukraine support their president. And we're here. What are we doing here? They don't want us here. And you can imagine a society where the only information you get, imagine a society where the only information you have access to is something like GB News. What sort of society would that create? It would create a brainwashed army who would march into another country thinking that they were liberating them when they were oppressing them. Dehumanizing your enemy makes it easier to kill them. Yes, well said, Cthulhu. That's the first. We've seen that's the first action they take. Dehumanize the enemy. The enemy is not a person. They're not like us. They're inferior. That's the idea behind it. So it makes it easier for you to kill them. Because you're not killing people, you're killing things. James Gillian, thanks so much for that super chat. I'm sure Putin wants to create an uninhabitable desert, even though nuclear and conventional weaponry between Russia, Europe, and NATO. But the Ukrainian people are devoting their hearts for the chance of good, true democracy. Yes, they are. I think that's what they did back in 2014. They kicked out the previous president, the former president. They said, we don't want these people running us anymore. And they had a rebellion. And since then they have been building a country based on democracy, and building a country, a European country. That's the thing about it. They feel European. And I think that's what Putin in particular was so angry about. That's what he was trying to stop. He says, no, you're not European, you're Russian. And I think now he's created a situation where he has permanently cut off Ukraine from any chances of joining a Russian Federation or a USSR or something like that. Apologies for the typo, Mac. No worries. Thank you so much for the super chat, Cthulhu and James. Are you pro-NATO? Says Diddlymus. No, I'm not pro-NATO. I see it as necessary, because what is the alternative? You know, if Ukraine had been part of NATO, it wouldn't have been invaded. Is NATO good? NATO has a lot of problems. There are a lot of problems related to NATO, connected to NATO, but it is an insurance policy. Estonia, think for a moment, would Estonia have been invaded if it wasn't part of NATO? I think Estonia would be in a very difficult spot now. It would probably have been invaded as well, but it's not, because it's part of NATO. So I'm not an advocate for NATO, but what's the alternative? AN98, thank you so much for that super chat. What are the chances of America getting involved in the Ukraine crisis, and if will Putin do something stupid if or when he loses? A lot of interesting things to say about that. So will America get involved? I don't think so, because America doesn't want to get involved anymore. I think America wants, if America is getting involved in things, it's through NATO. So we have to look at whether NATO gets involved. The United States on its own is not going to do that. I think those days are gone. Unless they're with states, I think any new interactions post Iraq are going to be NATO based. So after Iraq, I think the US said, okay, we're not going in on our own, we're going to go through NATO. Now that could change with the next US president. You know, a Republican even worse than Trump, or Trump again, could go down that road. But I think the idea has always been now, or recently has been, we go through NATO. So it's whether NATO actually get involved. At this stage, NATO have said they're not going to. They're not going to impose a no-fly zone. Now, they've said a no-fly zone, but that doesn't mean they couldn't get involved in some other way. But you see, the problem is that as soon as NATO, for example, if NATO sent tanks across the border into Ukraine to defend Ukraine, then you can have Russian tanks, Russian soldiers against US or NATO soldiers. Then you can have a war between NATO and Russia. And Russia wouldn't be able to stand up to that, so Russia would not be able to defeat NATO. They're struggling to defeat Ukraine. NATO is much better equipped, much better technology, a highly trained, well-equipped force. NATO would, I'm not saying wipe the floor with Russia, but it would definitely give it hell, and it would defeat Russia. But the problem is then we go on to the nukes. So how would Putin respond? So will Putin do something stupid if he loses? I'm deeply concerned about that. I think, he'll be somebody who's cornered, can act very irrationally. And there's a chance that he could try and attack the West in some way with nuclear weapons. It's possible. So we have to look at the people surrounding him. Would they stop him from doing that? Would they isolate him? That's what we hope will happen, that if the situation gets really bad, the generals will decide, okay, we have to work together, we have to protect the country, we have to protect the planet, we have to protect the Russian people. So we have to isolate the president because he's not able to do his job, or he's risking doing something that is beyond our control. So I don't know how it functions with how any attack would be carried out. Whether the president is able to decide and then generals have to just follow through, or whether he issues a command and then the generals have to follow through. Because I don't know if it's civilian based or if it's military. So eventually, of course, it's military based. But how many layers do you have to get to the guy who actually presses the button, the guy who launches the missile? So if Putin makes a command, who has to follow through? So I imagine the chief of staff. The chief of staff issues his command to. So at what stage could it be stopped? I think that's the important question. And I don't know, and I don't think many people, even military experts in the West, know at what stage it could be stopped. Because somebody would have to decide, okay, I'm not following this order. And if they don't follow the order, what is the consequence for that individual? They could be killed and replaced, or they could resist, and it goes back up the chain of command, and somebody says, we need to stop this. So I think there are a lot of things that could happen. It could go in multiple directions. Putin could issue a command, senior generals could reject it. He could issue a command, junior officers could reject it. The guy pressing the button may reject it. Or nobody may reject it, and then we're in very serious trouble. Thanks for that super chat. Thank you, AN98. We have one from Jerry. Thanks so much, Jerry. Thanks so much for that super chat. Republicans want a corrupt Russian leader who they can work with. Yes, they prefer somebody who's on there, as they said about Saddam Hussein. Getting back to Saddam Hussein again. They used to say that Saddam Hussein is a bastard, but he's our bastard. He's a bad guy, but he's our bad guy. And I think that's what the Republican... Look, and maybe the American... either Democrat or Republican. Let's not paint the Democrats as angels here, but definitely the Republicans would like to have their guy in Russia. But I don't think that's going to happen. They like it, but it's not going to happen. Cthulhu again, thanks so much for that super chat. Putin would resort to chemical weapons before nukes, as Russia used in Afghanistan. Yeah, and I think you're right here, because chemical weapons are difficult to pin down in the sense that he can say, well, we didn't do it, it was the Ukrainians. And the Ukrainians would say, no, it wasn't us, it was the Russians. And then you'll have this information that's flowing around where, well, they'll be saying, well, how about, yes, did Ukraine actually have stockpiles, and who is responsible here, who is to blame? And yes, a nuke is very easy to identify. Chemical weapons are much more difficult. Thanks for that super chat. We have Fearless Wolf. Thanks so much again. Why don't NATO use drones to provide intelligence to the Ukrainian soldiers in that capacity? I imagine the Ukrainian army have received drones from a number of countries, so I think they are doing that. And we have seen some footage of tanks being destroyed by drones. So I don't think there is a huge number of drones, because I think it's difficult to operate them. There is a significant number of anti-aircraft weaponry on the ground. But what's not happening is we don't see much of the Russian Air Force getting involved. We're seeing a lot of ground troops. And something I read interestingly today is that one of the reasons it seems that this attack has gone so badly for Putin is that the people he put in charge, and this seems to be followed up by evidence. If you look at a lot of the equipment, you see a lot of equipment with the letter Z on it, but you also see a lot of equipment with the letter V on it. And I think the letter V, or no, it could be letter Z, I don't remember, but one of these signs represent the airborne, the Russian airborne unit. And the airborne are not, so airborne in most countries, from what I've read, airborne in most countries are an elite fighting force. They're sent in behind enemy lines to sabotage equipment, to hold territory until the regular army arrives. And instead with the Russian airborne, they're not like that. They're like, they're sort of like riot police. They're not like a fighting army. And what they do is they're used to instill fear in people. So they're not actually well equipped. They're not actually highly trained. It's just that they're really big guys. They spend all the time in the gym, but they're used as a force to intimidate. So they're sent in to intimidate the public, to intimidate officials, to intimidate civilians, and they generally don't face any sort of resistance. They don't they don't face a fighting force, an army, and I think that's why they were more successful in Crimea, because they were not facing an army in Crimea. They were facing regular or ordinary people, and that's why they were able to intimidate. But in Ukraine, they went in and they were completely destroyed because they were not expecting to be facing an army, and they're not trained to fight an army. They're like a sort of police force, almost like a paramilitary force, but not real soldiers. But I think I shared the thread on that on Twitter if anyone wants to check it out. Very, very interesting. But when it comes to drones, I don't think they actually have a huge number. But there isn't a lot of aerial combat going on. So they could be used against tanks, but it seems that the Ukrainians would prefer to use soldiers on the ground. But there are some questions to be asked about why we're not seeing a lot of aerial combat. Thanks for that super chat. So guys, we're well over halfway through the stream, so I'll give us our little break to enjoy a little comedy moment, and then we'll be back in just a second. Hope you enjoy this.
When you wake up, well, you know I'm gonna be the man who shoulder lie to you. And when we go out, well, you know I'm gonna be the man who acts as Putin's fool. When you're suffering, well, you know I'll never be the man who's suffering with you. And if you're Muslim or a Syrian refugee, then you're not welcome in my outright UKIP queue. 'Cause I would tell 500 lies and that I would tell 500 more. Just a stone cut hate and xenophobic violence till we're out the door. If you're working, well, you know there's gonna be all sorts of low-paid work for you, because the migrant who does the work that you won't do has been deported and they're back in the EU. If you're a patient with medication overshoes, remember, I'm the reason why it can't get through. Then when you're hospitalised, no one's there to care for you, because half the nursing staff have been deported too. So she won that because there'll be no king too.
What a horrible individual this guy is. So let's move on. This connection is a little bit slow tonight. Give it a moment to load. The reason why there's no much air combat is due to Western anti-aircraft weapons. Yes. So yeah, if you don't want to be putting up a lot of airplanes if they're going to get shot down, because these things are pretty expensive, and of course you lose trained pilots as well. So it says here, arise, Sir Gavin Williamson, for services to intergalactic idiocy. So this is from The Independent. It says here, by the time of his death at the age of 51, England's only World Cup winning captain, Bobby Moore, was not considered to have done quite enough to receive a knighthood, which only makes it all the more impressive that Sir Gavin Williamson should have managed it at just 45. So I didn't know this. Bobby Moore didn't receive enough to receive a knighthood, but Gavin Williamson did. Where we may ask, did the mere Mr. go wrong? Well, hindsight is a wonderful thing. It's clear to see that he was frankly wasting his time recovering from testicular cancer at the age of 23 and going on to captain his country on 90 occasions. Far better, surely, to have been sacked from the cabinet once for being a danger to national security, and sacked again for giving the job of awarding A-level grades to an algorithm that didn't work. Oh my goodness. At this point, it's important to point out, for legal reasons, that Sir Gavin denies having endangered national security by leaking information from National Security Council briefings. But it's also important to point out, for comic reasons, he has also made those denials to Theresa May, and she did not believe him, which is why she sacked him. Oh my goodness. This is Gavin Williamson appearing on LBC back in 2021. Whoops. Audio.
Today, I know that for many there will be the same trepidation and anxiety I felt 27 years ago when I opened that envelope. How did you fare 27 years ago today, as it were?
Well, I remember walking up to those college doors, Nick, and going into my college at sixth form and getting that envelope, opening up that envelope, seeing the grades on there, and just feeling absolute delight.
Yeah, never mind that. What were those grades?
As the sudden realisation, Nick,
yeah,
that actually all my dreams of that next step of doing social science at Bradford University opened up. And for a lad growing up in Scarborough, Bradford was the most exotic and exciting place in the whole world.
What were your grades again, Mr. Williamson?
I don't think I mentioned my grades,
no,
Nick.
So I wonder if you could.
So no, it's absolutely fine. But it opened the
what were your
pathway to those next steps, and I was absolutely delighted at that.
But you can't
and that's
remember
what
your grades.
So many. It's so long ago. I mean, it's 27 years ago.
Did you get 3 A stars?
I didn't get 3 A stars. It's fair to say.
Did you get 3 Ds? What did you get?
But what it is fair to say...
Why won't you tell me? Is it a state secret?
It absolutely is. I've forgotten. It's so long ago. I mean, it's 27 years ago. I mean, you probably can't remember what was happening last weekend, Nick. We've got to that
but I was greater years than you, Mr. Williamson.
You can't remember. Oh, my goodness. Okay. Naturally, it's worth going again through Gavin Williams' best bits, though none are better than when he dialed into Good Morning Britain live from a safari park, only to have his interview terminated by Richard Medley to the bemusement of a passing semi-rampant elephant. But we all know the bits that counts. Boris Johnson rewarding loyalty above all else, which, given his track record with the L word, only makes sense as some kind of parasexual perversion. Some men pay good money to be tied up and systematically humiliated. Johnson publicly awards people for loyalty. And so we recall the scenes on the sweaty corridors behind the House of Commons in now quaint summer of 2019, when Tory MPs marched in out of their sweaty little room. They really have made their own in recent years with their incessant confident votes and leadership elections. And there was little Gavin, the de facto chief whip of the Johnson campaign, scurrying around them in a shameless element, making egregious demands of his colleagues, like, for example, that they photograph their ballot papers, the Boris ticked box, and send them to him for proof. Oh my goodness. You know, once again, being knighted is no longer an honor. But no, look, it's an honor for people who are not politicians. It's not an honor for politicians. They receive this because of loyalty to the party, loyalty to the Prime Minister, not loyalty to the country. So I want to move on to the cost of living crisis. Things are going to get much worse over the next number of months. April is going to be a very, very difficult time for many people. Prices of fuel are going up, doubling in some cases, be it for cars, be it for heating, gas, things like this. Gas for cooking, gas for heating is going up. Electricity bills are going up. And because, for example, the price of gas is going up, it means that ordinary items are going to become more expensive as well. But don't worry, politicians will be fine. If MPs are getting a decent pay rise, so should the rest of us. So it says here MPs are to get a good pay rise, and some will deserve it. MPs get £2,200 pay rise next month, the 1st of March. So this is from a few days ago. However, the rest of the public sector miss out with lower rises. It is now time for the public sector pay to be related to that of MPs or even the Prime Minister. That way, all get the same rise, whether a doctor, nurse, teacher or a refuse collector. In fact, the Prime Minister's allowance that of MPs could be linked to the private sector. Running the country is as important as running a major business and should be rewarded accordingly. If the Prime Minister's allowance was equal to, say, the median that is paid in the previous calendar year to executive directors of a FTSE 250 company, then all jobs and professions in the public would have their pay set at an appropriate percentage of the Prime Minister's allowance. All would be rewarded for payment from April. Of course, it is unlikely that company directors cut their pay. All those in the public sector would have a pay cut. This is from Gerald Cavalier. The politicians are not going to cut their pay, of course, but the idea that they're receiving a £2,200 pay increase when many people are not just seeing their wages frozen, but they're seeing a real drop in wages, drop in income because of inflation. So if your wages are frozen, if you don't get a pay rise, but inflation is at 5%, well then you get a de facto pay cut of 5%. Because inflation, prices are increasing by 5%, your wages are staying the same. That means you're 5% worse off next year. Pay rises should be, and we've heard from the governor of the Bank of England say, no, we shouldn't be increasing people's wages. But then you're making people poorer. If people are poorer, they spend less money. People spend less money, the economy is worse off. So we need to actually give people more money. You don't even have to go to a UBI. Bing, bing, UBI. As I said, I need a big red button with UBI, and when I press it, something happens. We don't even need to go to a UBI, but you need to increase, people's wages have to go up, because if they're not, they're getting poorer. If they're getting poorer, they're not spending money. They're not spending money in the economy. The economy starts to suffer. If you give them money, the economy is stimulated. We've seen this before. In Luxembourg, your pay is automatically adjusted for inflation to ensure that you don't become poorer. Well done, Luxembourg. I'm putting my heating on for a few minutes. My son will be throwing a party. Soon people will be getting longer for protesting against the Tories than Tory murderers. Yes, the crime bill is determined to take away people's right to protest. It's getting very much like Putin's Russia. No, it's not there yet. There's a good bit to go, but stopping people from protesting is the first step. If they can unify so quickly to seize Russian billionaire assets, they can unify to apply windfall tax to the obscene wealth of BOTs. £60 trillion. Damn autocorrect, pay rise, not praise rise. What's a UBI? Somebody asked. Sheep wasp eye. UBI. If you like, you can check out the merchandise on the link in the description of the video. There you can find some very nice UBI material there. No promotion, of course. So in relation to the cost of living, I want to show you this video.
On the streets, in the homes, and behind the wheels of this country, there's a cost to bear of a faraway conflict.
Great Yarmouth, is it, man?
Higher energy bills, higher prices at the pump, higher pressure on us all, especially those who drive for a living.
In the last couple of months, it seems to have crept up. In the last week, it seems to have raced up. The costs of going to work have never been anywhere near as high, and the energy bills are frightening. You're sort of running from one to the other and trying to keep the cost down on all of them, and struggling.
It's caused by high costs of oil and gas processed in refineries like this. Crucially, the UK buys very little from Russia, but Europe buys a lot. It means any disruption pushes prices right up, prices across the whole market. And it affects more than just the cost of heating our homes. It's also biting here.
The tanks, which we're now in front of here, hold about 7,500 tonnes each.
Where fertiliser arrives, is turned round and sold on. Mammoth tanks of the stuff, made using gas, destined for the fields of our farmers. A huge part to play in the price of our food.
Prices for nitrogen fertilisers have gone up by 300 or 400% in the last year, and that was without the war. Because we're at the start of the food chain, what we pay, passed on to farmers and in turn to consumers, is going to hit everybody in the pocket.
That's what we always have to remember. We think of, gas prices are rising, okay, then I should be okay because I'll stop using the heating. But gas is used in energy production. You can see here it's used also to make fertilizer. And as he said at the beginning of the supply chain, means there's trickle down economics here. It trickles down to the final consumer. QA Library said, my friend's fuel bill gone up again. He's looking at an extra £12 million a year. Wow, my God. I just think of anyone who has a fleet of trucks. It must be insane at the moment. There are ways that you can claim VAT back, but you don't get that until the end of the year, I think. So, fuel prices are going way up. It's going to become much more expensive to ship goods. It's going to become more expensive to produce goods. So everything is going to become more expensive.
It means that we're on the path to the £3 loaf of bread, the £7 pint.
This conflict has underlined a difficult reality. You don't need to be a buyer of Russian gas to be highly vulnerable to its impact on the price, and the consequences are vast. An already pressing question is now urgent. How do we reduce our reliance on that gas and reduce it quickly? So what is the answer? Well, some say it lies underground here, not moving away from gas, but extracting our own, fracking for it, in the north of England. But for now it's banned for safety reasons. This former site lies still and unused. A huge failure, says the boss, in energy policy and planning.
Even if you were fracking for British gas, that wouldn't affect the price, would it? Because you'd still sell it at market price.
It may well affect the price. We've got to be able to do it more cheaply than taking shale gas from the United States, putting it on a boat, sailing it across the Atlantic. You know, people are saying, well, that won't make a difference because it doesn't affect prices tomorrow. But the reason we're in this mess is because we haven't thought about this, 10 years ago.
The only real shield is alternative sources, nuclear, solar or wind. But all are still too fledgling to cover demand. Energy security is not just about supply, it's about supply that's affordable.
Look, a lot of the problems with renewable energy like this, wind and solar and others, is that there isn't a political will. It's not about the cost, it's not about the technology. The technology is there. If we wanted, we could spend the money. It would cost a huge amount of money now, but we would become energy independent. But we don't want to do that because there isn't a political will to do that. There isn't a political party saying we're going to invest billions, hundreds of billions of pounds in becoming energy independent. Now, like a UBI, which I had hoped would be a result of the pandemic, when we saw the pandemic, people being forced to work from home, I thought this would be a catalyst to push more people towards supporting a UBI. That didn't work out. Here we have a war with Russia. You know, it's driving up energy prices, driving up gas prices. This should be a catalyst for us to move away from fossil fuels. But it doesn't seem to be, because it requires political will. This is, once again, this is not about technology. We can store this, people say, but what about when the wind is not blowing? Then we can store this energy. There are massive batteries we can set up. We can store this energy and create a smart grid which would feed energy to places that require it, and then take energy away from places that have an excess. But you need infrastructure to do that. You need to invest, and that takes time and money, and of course political will, which seems to be lacking of late. And it's not just the UK. Most countries around the world are not fully on board with the idea of energy independence. The oil and gas lobby ensure that there's no political will. Exactly. Yes. Because it's cheaper just to donate to a political party, and there you're sorted. We need the renewable energy lobby to buy politicians, and then they'll invest. Otherwise, battery technology isn't there. But it should. I think also because it's not been invested in. I think it's getting better all the time. We need PR, proportional representation. Yes. Domestic can have localized solar, wind, and good insulation. A number of things have to work together, but it requires money and political will. And the political will is the first step. The money comes after, because we can spend money if we want to. If we want to go to war, we can spend money. There's no one saying it's too expensive to go to war. Okay, you've never heard anyone. Once again, and this is not a criticism of what's happening in Ukraine, but you've never heard anyone say, "Can we afford to send these weapons to Ukraine?" No, and I wouldn't want them to say. But when it comes to, for example, renewable energy, we always ask, can we afford it? It's very expensive. And this is very important. It's for our future. It's for our now as well. But when it comes to investing in things for our society, to make society better, the first question is always, can we afford it? I can't speak for other Americans, but I see no reason to leave the US. Can you explore here why your whole life and wouldn't see a quarter of the US? I'm not sure I understand the comment, but I visited the US a few times. It's a beautiful country, and yes, you could live. Many people live in the US and they've never visited half of it. So there's so much to see. It's an entire continent. Politicians have a ridiculous return on investment, even in the US. Paul, Tory MPs are a massive return on investment. Spend £10,000 and win £100 million PPE contract. That's, invest at 10,000. Can you think of anything where you invest 10,000 and you get back 10 million or 100 million? So guys, we're almost at the end of the stream for today. Let's keep an eye on what's happening in Russia. Keep an eye on what's happening with Putin as well. If he's going to last, really cutting himself off from the rest of the world, really turning Russia into something that emulates North Korea. I don't think that's sustainable. I don't think the Russian people would accept that. But we'll have to see. So before we finish, we have our one for the road. I want to say thanks to everyone who came on tonight. Thanks for smashing the like button. Thanks to all who sent a super chat. Greatly appreciated. Great to see some old faces back once again. And thanks to the moderators for doing a wonderful job. I think we had a few trolls at the beginning, but they were sorted out swiftly. Thanks for doing that. Good job. So let's finish with our one for the road.
There are suggestions that this government isn't doing enough to help Ukrainian refugees. How would you respond? We have been world-beating in our efforts. For example, we've just announced that Ukrainian refugees won't have to fill out passenger locator forms when they land. Okay? They'll also be able to use slightly bigger plastic bags for their liquids and automatically get speedy boarding. I'm not sure that... Plus a free copy of The Sun, so they know what they're letting themselves in for. Is that all? No, we're also going to organise some world-beating group activities to keep them all busy. Such as? Well, perhaps something physical that involves stretching and lifting and putting into containers. Are you talking about picking vegetables? No, could be fruit as well. Aren't UK sanctions moving far too slowly in comparison to other European countries? No, in fact we are leading the world. From behind. What? Look, we're moving as fast as we can. It's just difficult to disentangle Russian money from certain UK institutions like football clubs and property portfolios and political parties. And we're bringing in the world-beating economic crime bill next week, which will force anonymous business owners to reveal their identities. But won't that give existing owners 18 months before they have to comply? Have you ever tried to sell a house? I'd say 18 months is a pretty tough deadline. Now, you yourself have actually received money from several Russian businessmen with links to Putin. I think it's important to remember that not all Russians support Putin. Well, those men do. Yeah, sure, they do. But my point still stands. Just look at all those brave protesters in Russia making their voices heard. But your own police and crime bill will actually make those kind of protests more difficult here. More difficult than in Russia? Well, no, but in fact, could we argue that we're making protests in this country more difficult and dangerous in order to make our protests better? A bit like survival of the fittest. Would you argue that? We could. Just like we could argue that we're cutting funding to the BBC because we know how important it is. Right? And making voting harder so people appreciate it more. Thank you, Minister. Next up, as it's announced that Gavin Williamson is to receive a knighthood, we ask, when did you last do something both sinister and ridiculous?
Well done. We have a super chat from Gareth. Thanks so much, Gareth, once again. Why don't we trade Russian gas for hot air being pumped out of Westminster? I done solved it, Max. I think I'll call it a Brexit benefit. Why? I'm in the freaking foggiest. I am the freaking foggiest. Well said, guys. Thanks for the super chat. Yeah, I think you solved the climate crisis. All that hot air coming out, it could be it could work some sort of turbine and generate electricity. There, problem solved. You should be handed a contract for that. But you have to make a donation first. You made a donation to me, so you just have to do an equivalent one to the Conservative Party. Thanks so much for that. Garrett's always fun. So, guys, once again, thanks for everyone who came on. Thanks for all the super chats. It's greatly appreciated from everyone. And thanks for the moderator for doing a wonderful job. See you on Sunday, hopefully, for our brunch, our Sunday brunch. I'll post some more information on that probably tomorrow on the channel, so do check it out. Hope you can join, and I'll see you then. So have a great Saturday and Sunday morning, and take care and be safe. Good night, guys. See you on Discord if you're a patron, of course. Good night.